And now,
it's 10 a.m.
Let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Happy 2026 to everybody out there. Big news week. Big news couple of days, and we will start off with Mitch Harper, our BYU Insider, who is joining us via Airlink, which means if you're watching us on YouTube, you can actually watch Mitch as well. With the big news that Jay Hill has departed BYU in favor of Michigan, joining Kyle Whittingham's staff, long rumored, and finally official. Actually, as of this morning, though the report really broke yesterday. What's going on, Mitch?
Hey, Ben. Happy to be on.
So at what point did you feel like this was, realistic, this was going to happen? Jay Hill was likely going to be following Kyle Whittingham to Ann Arbor.
When Kyle Whittingham got the Michigan job.
That early?
Yeah, because it just makes all the sense in the world for Jay Hill. And, BYU was never going to just, throw their hands up because BYU's got more resources than ever before. And they're a highly resourced program. And as coaches told me last month in bowl prep, Kalani's contract extension puts BYU in a place where they can obtain anything they want in college football, and it can put them on a platform that gives them a chance to, be among college football's great programs. But at the same time, Jay Hill's never had the chance to be the defensive coordinator for his mentor, and you see the emotion that Jay Hill had when I asked him about his relationship with Kyle Whittingham leading up to the Utah game in the build-up for that game in October, and if that was severed at all by crossing rivalry lines, and it was anything but the sort. So it makes all the sense in the world. And you see, too, where, again, the narratives, which sometimes win the day more than actual games in college football, because people want to just live up to a narrative in this sport. If you're an AD, what's an easier sell as a potential next head coach? Michigan DC or BYU DC? I mean, whether it's fair or not, I think Jay Hill as BYU DC is one heck of a coach. But as Michigan DC, a little more glamorous, a little bit more opportunity. Look at what Kentucky did in this coaching carousel. They hired the Oregon OC. Glamorous. So it made all the sense in the world to me, and I can't fault him for that, because when you get a head coach that's completely aligned with the way that you view defensive football and do it at a blue blood program, makes all the sense in the world.
We haven't seen contract numbers coming out here. Do you think money played a big role in it, or do you think BYU is able to pay similar numbers?
BYU can compete. I mean, they're this is no longer the BYU of old where it's simply just do more with less. I mean, they've got Kevin Young, they've got Kalani Sitake holding off the NBA, the Penn States of the world to get coaches. Again, and Jay Hill has had a great experience at BYU. I'm not going to speak for him, but he has had a lot of success. He's completely been great with Kalani Sitake. I mean, he even said that leading up to the Georgia Tech game and the Pop-Tarts Bowl, he said how Kalani's one of the best guys to work with in college football. But this is just such a unique opportunity that popped up that's hard to deny. And one thing about Jay Hill that I've learned in these 3 years covering him at BYU, the man wants to be on the biggest stages possible. That was one of the reasons he left Weber State, because he wanted the excitement back of being in just massive stages in the sport. And Michigan, to its credit, they play in some of the biggest stages, the biggest venues. And what an opportunity for him. So makes all the sense to me again that, but BYU is competitive. This is not, and that's where I think BYU fans should be excited about the future, because again, 10 years ago, you lose someone like a Jay Hill, you feel like all is lost. That's not the case anymore. You had a contract extension to maintain Kalani Sitake, and every time that he's been asked to go hire someone, it's been a really good move. He got Ty Detmer handed to him when he took the head coaching job because he wanted to be the head coach. The defensive coordinator spot, he went to someone he tried to teach into being the defensive coordinator because he had a limited budget in independence, and they still had, out of 5 out of the 7 years that Kalani Sitake was there, they were top 50 defensively. They had a top 4 defense one year, top 15 another. But Kalani Sitake knows defensive football. And he's also one of the most well-respected coaches now because he's got a resume that says that guy's there for the long haul. And now that you're paying money as an institution, you're going to have a nice pool of candidates to pull from that say, oh, you're going to make a lot of money. Oh, you got a head coach that's stable. He's not leaving anywhere. He's made that clear. And Kalani Sitake, a lot of coaches say that sort of stuff, like, I'm not leaving. Kalani Sitake is BYU football. He wants to be there for the long haul. If you're a defensive coordinator, why would you not want that opportunity? And then it can elevate you to whatever heights you want to go to in the profession. So this is no longer a program that's just suddenly you go to BYU and it's a career graveyard, or it's just a career where you're done. It's just BYU and that's it for you. You can achieve whatever you want to at BYU. And I think that's what's reason for excitement moving forward for BYU football.
What is the future fallout, or what is the next steps, I guess, within the defensive staff at BYU with Jay Hill departing? Are names leaving with him? Is that not expected?
You have to retain the staff and get a defensive coordinator in place. You know, someone like a General Guilford, I think, is important in all of this. You know, Jay Hill carried over General Guilford from the previous defensive staff at BYU. General Guilford's the lone holdover from Kalani's first coaching staff in 2016. He's been there every step of the way these past 10 years. Jay Hill elevated General Guilford since Jay Hill had been at BYU these past 3 years as the defensive passing game coordinator. General Guilford's an ace recruiter in Southern California. Excellent. Some of the best connections in that part of the country. So he would be someone that's a top priority. And also, too, with General Guilford, you know, I look at him as someone that is someone you look at strongly if you're Kalani Sitake as a defensive coordinator. It's risky because whenever you just, you know, replace a outstanding decorated resume like Jay Hill, you want to get someone like that again. But I will say General Guilford, I think, has evolved in a way to me where he's got defensive coordinator potential. When he first arrived at BYU, no, he was just probably a position coach, but he's producing NFL draft picks, NFL players out of the secondary at BYU. Before Kalani Sitake arrived, that wasn't happening. You went almost 20 years without secondaries or cornerbacks going to the NFL. And Gennaro has really taken, you know, the best of, you know, Jay Hill, you know, the previous regime with Kalani Sitake and Kalani Sitake. It's a really good coach. So, and it would make a lot of sense if Jay Hill wanted to take him over to Michigan. So I think he'd be a top guy that you got to prioritize if you're Kalani Sitake. And does that factor into the defensive coordinator conversation? I think that's something that Kalani has to think about.
What do you think Gary Anderson's role is going forward at BYU?
You know, it's interesting because he's such a nice piece to this staff. And with analysts being able to coach on the field and practices, what a nice luxury BYU's had. You know, to have Gary Anderson and Chad Kahaha as analysts, guys that have so much experience, so much background in the game of football to help with this defense the past few years. It's been a huge luxury for BYU. You know, I really wonder what Gary Anderson wants. Does he want to be back in a spotlight role? Being an analyst at BYU, he was loving it these past couple of years. I mean, just best spot. Just thoroughly happy being at BYU and being an analyst. Does he want to get back into the grind of then adding the dynamic of recruiting? Because as an analyst, yeah, you get a coach on the field, but you don't have to worry about recruiting. Yeah, you're probably aware of personnel that's being targeted and whatnot, but you're not making those Zoom calls. You're not doing off-campus spring evaluation period stuff. That's a big change. You know, so that's where I kind of wonder what does he want going forward? Because he's experienced the highest of highs in the sport. I mean, he's coached in the Big Ten as a head coach. He's coached in the Pac-12. He's done all these different things. So, but Gary Anderson was huge these past few years, and someone that worked right side by side with Jay Hill in that press box when they were calling games and defense. So he would be someone to me that you'd want to retain as well, whether that's an analyst. I mean, in a perfect world, I think you add him and Gennaro as the co-DCs. I think that would be a home run, I think, for BYU. But you know, again, what does Gary Anderson want? Because again, he's not someone he's experienced all of this in coaching. Does he want to get back in it and be out of the analyst behind the scenes role, if you will?
What does J.U. Hill's departure mean for the transfer portal?
You could have some losses, and someone that you'd monitor definitely would be Faletau Satawala. And just because that relationship was so strong in the recruiting process, from when Jay Hill arrived at BYU from Weber State, there's a handful of guys that you look at and say he formed really close relationships with. Faletau Satawala, Hunter Clegg, players like that probably don't come to BYU if not for Jay Hill. And so Faletau Satawala, second-team All-American this past season, he would be someone that he can play anywhere. And if BYU can retain him, that would be huge for BYU. But same time, like if he goes to Michigan as well, I understand that as well. I mean, I think the thing is with all of this, I think a lot of these fan bases in the state are just panicking right now. All these teams are 1 year. And look, you want to build a culture, and Kalani's doing that, and he's built that with BYU, but it's just all these teams are 1 year deals, and it's all business for the players and the coaches now. And you're constructing the best possible roster you can. If Faletau Satawala potentially left, and BYU would love to retain him, like he's someone that you absolutely would love to, dig deep into that rev share and give him a nice cut of money because he's that good. He could be one of the best safeties in the Big 12 next year. But if he left, you don't fault him either because there's plenty of safeties that would love to take that spot too. Again, BYU is operating a space where the reported enhanced budget with NIL, you're going to have options. So nothing is just a doomsday scenario. I think, the player that is the most critical in retention is obviously someone like a Bear Bachmeier. That's on the offensive side. But because of the quarterback position, everything else, though, there's always personnel. There's always guys that are ready to step up and be the next big thing. I think people like what they know. They like the familiarity, and you just want to retain it. But you didn't win the Big 12. You got to go take it another step further. And how do you do that? The portal is the quickest way to doing that, because high school players, even though it's a great top 20 recruiting class, top 25 rather, you can't bank on those guys to step in and be instant contributors to put you over the hump over Texas Tech. You got to fill the gaps with the portal no matter what it is. And whoever ends up being the next DC, that's going to be the challenge in front of them to put him over the hump. And someone like a Faletau Satawala would be ideal in retaining, but also you got to supplement this entire this defense in certain areas to get it to a higher level.
What do you expect to happen with Isaiah Glasker? Does this change anything for him?
I think it could possibly change. I mean, he's someone that could go to the NFL. I think this year was not as productive as last season, but Isaiah Glasker is an NFL talent. And, he's formed a really great relationship with Jay Hill. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. I could see him going to Michigan potentially. But I think also BYU could be in the cards for him too.
We've seen PK on the morning show discuss maybe Aaron Roderick making the jump from BYU, going back to Utah. Have you heard anything similar with that? Do you think there's some concern that A-Rod might not be the offensive coordinator at BYU next season?
There's definitely been talks for sure, and I've heard similar. And look, I think Aaron Roderick's been really good for BYU this past really 5 seasons. What he's done with the quarterback position, BYU is getting back to a place where it's a bit of a quarterback factory, and that's what Kalani Sitake challenged Aaron Roderick, or really any offensive coordinator that takes that role since he became the head coach, is to get back to having a factory at BYU. All the quarterbacks that he's had outside of probably Keaton Slovis have really been good for BYU, but even Keaton Slovis is playing in the NFL. He's got an opportunity. So I think that A-Rod's done a really good job. And for someone like him, but listen to opportunities, create leverage. I mean, I think that, again, it's just all a business. And the thing is that, I think BYU, though, is in a really good spot with their quarterback pipeline now and going forward. That, to me, BYU. But yeah, I've heard that there's been talks as well.
Names outside of the program that you think might be a candidate for the D coordinator job now that Jay Hill is gone?
USC defensive line coach Sean Nua, Florida State defensive coordinator Tony White, former Cal head coach Justin Wilcox. Those would be some names that I'd look at that would make a lot of sense.
Mitch, appreciate you jumping on. I know it's a very busy time. I know you're keeping an eye on the transfer portal as well. Find all of his coverage at KSLSports.com. Thanks for jumping on, Mitch.
Thanks.
There he is, Mitch Harper, giving us a breakdown on the latest with BYU and the jump from Jay Hill to go from BYU to Michigan, which was kind of the first thought right out of the gate. And Kyle Whittingham waited until after Utah had finished their bowl game to start to announce his coaching staff, and a couple of more names falling out there. Jason Beck obviously following him as well. We will talk about that with Steve Bartle. He's going to join us coming up at 11 o'clock, plus some transfer portal names for Utah, including Smith Snowden that has gone into the portal. So interesting and exciting. You know, you hate to lose these guys. Jay Hill changed the culture at BYU dramatically. You know, there was, I thought, a very clear before and after with the seriousness of BYU football before Jay was there and after. And look, a lot of that has to do with Kalani continuing to get better at the job, but Jay was a major upgrade at that position. Jason Beck was the best offense we've seen at Utah under Kyle Whittingham probably ever. I know there were some very solid offenses with Cam Rising, and when Utah had a good offense, they were very dangerous defensively, and they were very dangerous on the big picture, which is why they won 10 games again this year. Having to replace that is no guarantee. I think I have a little bit more faith that BYU will be able to find an adequate defensive coordinator because Kalani can do the job if he has to. If he has to put more attention on that side of the ball to buoy it, then that Utah will be able to easily replace Jason Beck. That doesn't mean it's impossible, certainly, but Jason Beck was really cooking at Utah there.
Especially if you look at who's making the hires, right? How many hires has Jason Beck made as Utah's head coach? Well, none yet. So we'll see what that means. Plus, not only is Jason Beck gone, but basically the whole offensive staff is leaving as well, where it's still TBD as to which assistants are going to be joining Jay Hill at Michigan. So, yeah, Utah's offense could look completely different than it did last year.
Yeah, BYU's defense could look completely different. I think that's the bizarre part of it. Names you're already losing just because they're seniors or going to the NFL. And then, if you lose a Glasgow or a Satawala, some of these names are going to be major in the state. And then, of course, Smith Snowden enters the transfer portal. I don't rule anyone out ever from returning, but it kind of didn't seem like that was going to be the direction there. We'll see. We'll see what the offensive side of the ball looks like. Does Utah's quarterback next season see out in the roster already? I don't know. We saw a lot of Devin Dampier in the bowl game for Utah, and he was probably his best game. I thought he was fabulous in the bowl game. We did not see a whole lot of Bird Ficklin and wasn't used all that effectively when he was out there. So we'll see what this looks like for Utah. We'll continue to break this down coming up next in the top three stories. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top three stories of the day on KSLSports.com. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Top three stories brought to you by J. Brooks Jewelers. J. Brooks, cherish your loved ones. It's J. Brooks Jewelers. Explore your expertly crafted engagement rings made from the finest materials. 2 locations up and down the Wasatch Front. Find them online, jbrooksjewelers.com. Christian, where are we starting today?
Well, Ben, the transfer portal opened basically overnight. Utah already losing several key players. John Henry Daly has officially entered the portal, as well as standout corner Smith Snowden. So between that and all the coaches and assistants leaving, this Utah team could look very different next year.
Here's what the staff at Michigan looks like at the moment concerning local names. Kyle Whittingham, the head coach. Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator. Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator. Lewis Powell, I know, surprised some people by making the jump. Some thought that he was going to stay at Utah. He ends up going to be the defensive ends coach at Michigan. Coy Detmer, who had been kind of the quarterback whisperer under Jason Beck, jumps to Michigan as well. And then Freddie Whittingham as the tight ends coach is going. Then, of course, Jim Harding. Some major losses there, certainly in the trenches. Jim Harding and Lewis Powell are huge losses. We know how good Jason Beck was at Utah. We know how good Kyle Whittingham's been for 20-plus years. And then Jay Hill, like we mentioned in the last segment, I thought really represented an uptick in seriousness of BYU football. They started to perform at a higher level. They started putting a lot of guys in the NFL. So replacing them is going to be extremely difficult. Whit has a good staff. at Michigan. They're going to win, and I would imagine they're going to pick some players off too, just because that's going to be the nature of the business. And we'll see where Smith Snowden ends up going. Is he an option for Michigan? I don't know. Certainly Isaiah Glasker gets very interesting. Satawala is very interesting. J.J. Buchanan. We'll see if either of the quarterbacks follows Jason Beck to Michigan as well. So there's a lot on the board there. It's just going to be different. And some of this is because this is a particularly wild rearranging of chairs when it comes to the names and the coaching staffs at both of these schools. I just think you're going to lose players every offseason. I just think naturally you're going to have guys jump from one side to another or leave the state altogether. And this is only the beginning of it.
Yeah, and obviously it's not made easier, right, with, like you mentioned, the changing of the chairs. And I guess who are players more loyal to? Their position coaches like Lewis Powell or their DC like Morgan Scalley. So with guys like Snowden entering the portal, obviously we didn't hear of the DB's coach going to Michigan, but like it's just it feels like Utah built so much to get past those like the 5 and 7 year, right? They spent so much time and effort getting back on track, all for it to just fall out from underneath them immediately following the season. It's crazy how fast this all happens.
I do wonder, and maybe this is not a thing. Maybe it's everybody, and you're foolish if you try and do something different. But, when you rely on mercenary culture to build your team, which Utah did, you went out and hired Jason Beck last year and had him bring his best quarterback, his best receiver, his best running back. Of course, that was going to change. And then you brought in Mark Ottawaya, and with Mark Ottawaya, brought his best running back and Wayshawn Parker. It's like, and it seems like Mark Ottawaya is sticking around at Utah. At least he hasn't been replaced. He's not jumping to Michigan. They've got Alford to stay there. So if you build it on guys who are saying, yeah, I've hit the transfer portal, it worked out for me, and I got paid, why not hit the transfer portal again and see what's best for me and see who offers the most money? And it's way more fun to have all this money than to not have money. I get why that's going to be the case. And look, Utah's going to do the same thing here. If you bring A-Rod or somebody who's not been working in football, Jonathan Smith being kind of the big name that's circulating with Utah right now, it isn't actively working somewhere, you're probably not rating that team of all their talent. That is the advantage of going out and hiring somebody who is on a team that has an established culture or an established identity and bringing them with you. Jason Beck brought 4 guys with him, and that was the huge positive of landing him. Not only is he a good play caller, but he had proven talent around him that knew how to do exactly what he wanted, and Utah benefited from that. So do you go out and try and find an offensive coordinator that does the same thing, that brings in his guys, his quarterback, his receiver, his running back, and then you're ready to go from day one?
Yeah, because, we kind of talked about this, I think it was Wednesday's show, right? It's a lot harder to find a quarterback and then scheme around them than it is to, I guess, find the coordinator and then, it's easier to find a quarterback to fit that new system.
Or brings one with him because
Right.
he already knows how that system works. Absolutely. So, if you do see a Jonathan Smith, how does he fit with a Bird Ficklin or a Devin Dampier if that ends up being the name? And look, Jonathan Smith's like the nicest person I've ever met in my life. I've probably met him a half dozen times, and I've loved every interaction I've ever had with him. If that were to be the name, I think it would be a very interesting and exciting hire for Utah. But, yeah, he doesn't bring somebody with him. He's coming in having to craft something around probably what Utah already has, or he has to go recruit somebody differently altogether.
Especially with Dampier and Bird being very unique players, right? They don't necessarily fit into any offensive system. You have to have a very particular read option offense built around that.
Which, ironically, I think A-Rod could actually do pretty well. Now, I know BYU's had some great passers in his time, but Jaron Hall could really run the ball. Now, he didn't do it a ton. Bear Bachmeier clearly can really run the ball and is comfortable doing that. You could put Bird or you could put Dampier in a very similar situation and have some success. So keep an eye on the transfer portal. I guess it's maybe not been as active today as I expected, but a lot of these guys I would suspect are renegotiating with their own teams first, trying to see if it's easier. This is who I should talk to. This is where I'm booking my appointments, and I'm going to see what they have for me. And then I will start to see actually who's going to go out there. And I know you're supposed to actually put your name in the transfer portal first. Maybe they put their name in the portal after they talk to their team if they don't like what they hear.
Do you think there's a point where Utah can officially hit the panic button? Like if they start losing a certain amount of players after already losing all these assistant coaches, you know what I'm saying? Is there a point where it hits that and they're like, okay, now it's time to really worry about next season? Or are you confident in Morgan Scalley's ability, I guess, to be right no matter what?
By all accounts, not his ability to be right no matter what. You know, the best coaches of all time are not right no matter what. I do think, and talking to people behind the scenes and seeing everything everyone's reported, like, we have seen Morgan Scalley preparing for this job for 10 years now. Like, he has recognized what he's going to be going through when he takes over. Now, I think he had hoped Jason Beck would be in place, and he was only making one decision on who he was going to hire. And ironically, it sounds like the defensive coordinator is maybe the job that's most settled of all of them, which is going to be Colton Swan, the linebackers coach at Utah. Seems likely that he's going to be the man. I do think he's thought about this before. So I don't think he's going to get caught with his pants down. So I don't think that's actually a major issue. Now, if he can't land somebody or nobody can see eye to eye with his vision of an offense, I think that would be difficult. Utah's a good job. Utah's a good job. It's a place you can come in and win. And look, Jason Beck just proved if you win at Utah, you can maybe get an opportunity to coach at a bigger spot. Now, he went because Witt went, but if you have success on the offensive side of the ball at Utah, it's not hard to imagine that somebody would come and try and poach you or you'd continue to get a raise. And conceivably, because I don't think anyone thinks that Morgan Scalley's making as much money as Kyle Whittingham was last year, there should be a little bit more money around the program to pay your coordinators if you need to. And Utah, after losing Kyle Whittingham, should be willing to put a little bit more money in the pockets of their coordinators if they feel like it's going to give Morgan a softer landing as the head coach now. I would hope they would do that. And then also put that same money towards NIL, make sure they're spending that full $22 million allotment.
I am curious to see what kind of experience they bring in around Morgan, you know, with this being his first stint as a head coach. Sometimes you'll see that, right? Bringing in guys who can help with that and bring stability and bring, I guess, veteran experience and leadership. And obviously Scalley's been a DC for a long time. It's not like he's brand new to coaching, but being a head coach is a big jump. So we'll see.
Jonathan Smith would make a ton of sense in that realm if that was the case he wanted to go. Having coached at Oregon State, he was a former quarterback himself. You know, he was the quarterback for Chad Ochocinco at Oregon State and TJ Hushmanzada, I believe, and then was the head coach at Oregon State. He was a quarterback's coach, I think, under Chris Peterson at Boise State. He was the head coach at Michigan State, and that obviously flamed out, but that was a bit of a cash grab for who was otherwise kind of thought of as one of the more respected coaches in all of college football. And what I didn't realize is just because he's been doing this for so long, Jonathan Smith and Morgan Scalley are the same age. So if they ended up, if you said they came up together, kind of rose through the ranks together, I think that would make a lot of sense. And then, yes, has that head coaching experience where maybe you could bring in and have a little bit more understanding. That's why I'm a little surprised we haven't heard Gary Anderson's name thrown around a little bit more, making a return to Utah, just with his past. And if he was an analyst, how well he would do in that role. But I'm not worried about Morgan needing to hit the panic button. The truth is, I think Utah's already been through the worst of it. I think losing Jason Beck and Whittingham and all these position coaches, that's the disaster. The rebuild should not be as difficult as how much they lost.
And Scalley said multiple times in the post-game following the Las Vegas Bowl that they knew what was coming and that they have a plan.
Yep.
And to just be patient. So I'm curious to see what that plan is because, sometimes if you do plan for things correctly, then you will end up in a good position, and sometimes things don't go according to plan. So I am curious to see what ends up happening.
And if it ends up being A-Rod, it's a guy he's known his whole life, or at least for the last probably 15, 20 years now, coaching in the States. So I think that would be an A-plus hire as well, because that would be a guy who Morgan clearly identified long ago that he wanted to work with once again. So we'll see. It's very interesting. The incestuous nature of BYU and Utah continues to move forward with coaches jumping side to side. We'll see what it ends up looking like. All right, what's next?
Well, it's 2026, new year. Looks like tanking is back on the menu. Cody Williams led the team in scoring yesterday because nobody else played.
Cody Williams had the career high. Kyle Anderson had 22. I think it was his season
career
high as well. The Jazz played well. I mean, they were down 16-0 to start the game. The Clippers clearly took their foot off the pedal, and the Jazz jumped back into the game and actually took a 3-point lead midway through the third quarter, 4-point lead midway through the third quarter before Kawhi Leonard turned it on and really won the fourth quarter. But yeah, I do think you saw, and we've seen signs of it recently, some games where guys are resting, some games where they've sat two centers when they probably only needed to sit one. I think you've seen the Jazz start to toy with the idea of not trying to win every game at its most. And Will Hardy's still going to coach. He still coached a lot last night and still tried to win that game through the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, as I mentioned, Kawhi took over. But I do think you're going to start to see this more aggressively. And I wrote my article last night. You can go read it at KSLSports.com. Ironically, even with the Jazz, I think, performing so much better this year than they did last year, they are still closer to having the 5th worst record in the NBA than they are being in the play-in tournament. Now, there are fewer teams between them and the play-in tournament than the 5th worst record in the league. But they are a game back, or I should say a game ahead, technically, of the Mavericks, the Hornets, and the Nets for the 5th worst record in the NBA. They're a game and a half back of the Portland Trail Blazers. So, again, they're actually closer to owning the 5th worst record in the NBA than they are being in the 10th seed in the West. And with 49 games left in the season, they're going to have an adequate opportunity to do whatever they want. If they did decide, hey, we want to make the play-in tournament, we want to give Oklahoma City the worst possible draft pick that we can, they could make that push. If they decide we want to get into the lottery, they can get there as well. And yes, what you saw last night against the Clippers is one of these quote-unquote 2-for-1 games. Clippers were behind the Jazz in the standings, so they pick up a win, and the Jazz lose, so they had that loss to their resume. And then the Clippers are actually now tied with the Jazz in the standings. You've got Charlotte coming up. You've got 3 games against Dallas coming up in the next few weeks. You've got games against Charlotte coming up in the next few weeks. Those are all those 2-for-1 games where wins by those other teams are particularly impactful when it comes to the lottery at the end of the year.
It also double or I guess triple helps out the Jazz in that sense because remember, Oklahoma City owns the Clippers draft pick.
They do,
right?
they do as well.
So not only do the Jazz
hold on to
their pick and keep their pick from going to the Thunder, they're also kind of helping out the rest of the NBA by helping LA hold on to their pick and keep that one from going to the Thunder. But I liked your tweet yesterday you put out. Obviously, Austin Ainge said you won't be seeing that this year in regards to tanking. Well, it's 2026 now. It's a new year.
2025. I don't think he was trying to get off on a technicality there. But, yeah, I thought, it was kind of funny. And, it's the hard part of where they were. And, honestly, why, as much as we bemoan Coach Speak and why that was a great quote and why I wrote about it and everybody wrote about it and ran with it, you can still hear them talk about it on every national podcast whenever the Jazz get brought up that wasn't going to be the plan. Sometimes you have to change your plan. Sometimes if you realize, we didn't think Keontae George was going to be a borderline all-star this year. Now, all of a sudden, you do have to change some lineups to lose games to make sure you hold on to a pick because there's no reason to give away a free lottery pick to already the best team in the NBA. You got to change the hand that you're dealt.
And that quote was so vague anyways. Like, what did he mean by you won't be seeing that this year? You won't see tanking, period. You won't see fake injuries that are going to get the Jazz fined. And like DJ was saying, I think that was a very good point he brought up when he joined you the other day. Like, people will, coaches and front office members will say things, and then their opinion can change, and sometimes that just happens.
To give you a sense of why, though, the Jazz may want to drop to the 5th worst record in the NBA versus where they are right now, which is tied for 8th with the Clippers. If the season ended today, the Jazz would have about a 58% chance of holding on to their pick and about a 42% chance of giving it to the Thunder. If they drop to 5, they'd have a 99.5% chance of holding on to their pick and a 0.5% chance of dropping all the way to 9. Very slim. Certainly not impossible, but very slim that they would give up. Really, I think if you fall to about that 6th worst record in the NBA, you're going to hold on to your pick. It's over 96%. Again, Dallas won with 1.8%. It's certainly possible that you could lose it even if you have a 96% chance of holding on to it. But your odds of moving to the lottery jump up to like 40%, and your odds of losing the pick are at like 4. So I do think that's going to be the sweet spot for the Jazz. What I do think I would bemoan right now, unfortunately, and because it's a very real injury, is that last night would have been a fun night if you're a Jazz fan to see Ace Bailey get the keys to the car and go and play in the role that you saw from Kyle Anderson and Cody Williams. Not that Cody shouldn't be getting a shot as well, and Cody I thought was actually very good on the offensive side of the ball last night. But you would like to see Ace in a situation where he doesn't have Keontae or he doesn't have Lauri Markkanen. He's got to create on his own. He's got to take some more of those shots, and maybe he gets a 20-shot night. And what does that actually look like, and what do you learn from him in those situations? That is something, if I were a Jazz fan, I would want to see prioritized probably over the next 40 games, 45 games.
Especially because looking at Keontae, I mean, how many times did he have that in his rookie and even second year where he was kind of the go-to guy, and whether that was good for him or not, there were opportunities for him to just go shoot. And Ace, I think, does need to get those because that is going to be his ability. That is going to be what makes him into the all-star caliber player that he can be is, taking over games by being a unstoppable scorer.
think Keontae got a taste of what that glory can look like when you score 30. I think he also got a taste of how difficult it is to shoot 2 of 15 and have everyone blame you for the loss. And what do you get to work harder to do? Do you want to work hard to disappear so you never get any of the credit for any of it, but you're in the NBA? Or do you want to be the star that gets the glory? And he's getting the glory right now, and it's been beneficial for him. Yeah, put Ace in those same situations and see what he can do. All right, what's next?
Utah Mammoth begin 2026 with a bang yesterday. Dylan Gunther gets his first career hat trick.
7-2 for the Mammoth yesterday on the road at New York. New York's very good. It was a very impressive win for them, especially considering they were playing on New Year's Day in New York at 1 o'clock right after the ball drop. I mean, I imagine there's a curfew, but I suspect the guys enjoyed the festivities somewhat. So to bounce back and get the victory there to start the new year, I thought was a really good sign. Yes, Dylan Gunther picking up the 3 goals. No empty netters in that either. He really kind of earned that hat trick. Was very impressive. But the entire team was good. They were good on the on the power play. They were good on the PK. You did see Sergachev kind of step up. He hadn't played particularly well. Clayton Keller got the goal. And then on top of it, Clayton Keller got the call that he will be joining the U.S. Olympic team as well. He's one of the final players to make that roster. But you hope, as we mentioned on Tuesday, it was Wednesday, you hope that's a weight off his shoulders. I'm sure he was waiting for that. I'm sure he was nervous he wasn't going to make it. He hadn't played particularly great this season. So to get that call and make the team, it's got to feel like a real vote of confidence. And sometimes guys take that confidence and they really run with it. And hopefully he can rebound to playing at the level he was last season, because with Logan Cooley out, Clayton Keller's the ideal guy to assume not a bigger role. I mean, he's the star of the team, but, to make up some of that gap where the production is lost with Cooley. And we haven't seen it yet from Clayton Keller, but that'd be a major plus for him.
Yeah, it definitely is time for him to step up. And I know that he's had, personal loss in his life, and that's very, very tough. And I don't want to make it seem like it's easy to move on from that, but Clayton Keller is a special player, and he is the best current player on this team. I think he has the potential to be. Obviously, last year almost hit 100 points on the season, so I'd like to see him be more aggressive in shooting the puck. And you're right, the Four Nations face-off last year was so much fun, and Clayton Keller, I think, felt left out because he wasn't able to participate in that. And hopefully the Olympics this year is just as fun, cheering on Team USA, but now Clayton Keller will be there.
And exciting. I'm excited to talk to Nick Olczyk. He's going to join us coming up at 11:30, getting a breakdown on what this means, because remember, NHL players haven't always been able to represent their teams during the Olympics. This is a bit of a recent agreement in 2026 and 2030 that they're going to allow the players to depart their rosters to go and play. So very, very cool there that we're going to get to see. And then they're playing in L.A., right? Is that where are the games this year?
Italy, I think.
Italy, you're right.
Italy's
the Summer Olympics. Sorry, I'm thinking winter still. Going to Italy where they've had all the issues with the ice rink. But very cool. Nice opportunity. And then Olli Mata is also on the team for Team Finland as well. So another Utah Mammoth player being represented. So excited for that, and cool to see if they can keep this momentum going. Staying in New York, another game tomorrow at 1 o'clock, another midday game. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the disaster that has been the college football playoff so far. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Very happy New Year to everybody out there. Jake will be back with us on Monday, coming up in about 12 minutes. We're going to be talking to Steve Bartle, getting a breakdown on the latest with the University of Utah. Steve was kind enough to join us earlier this week, but since we last talked to him, half the Utah's coaching staff is gone. So we're talking to him again and figuring out which direction Utah is going to head with their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator again. I think not that this was a job Morgan Scalley thought he was going to be hiring once he took over as head coach for Utah. I wonder if there is some value, I'll have to ask Steve about this, to having gone through it last year. He was a major piece of this process last year to bring in Jason Beck. I wonder if they had interviewed maybe some other names that would still be candidates for him now, and maybe he sees what he did like about Jason Beck or things he maybe didn't like, and not just about Jason Beck, but Andy Ludwig and all the names that he has seen cycle through Utah, the things he'd like to see retained, things he'd like to see brought in. Is it a heavier emphasis on recruiting? Is it development? Is it bringing guys with you? I think those are all major pieces of this conversation. So excited to talk to Steve about that. I don't think anyone's necessarily excited to talk about the college football playoff. Certainly the college football playoff committee should not be ringing a bell. It has been bad. It's simply not been a very good product, and yesterday was particularly poor. I didn't think the first weekend was great. We saw the Ole Miss blowout over Tulane. We saw Oregon blow out James Madison. Alabama, Oklahoma was a decent game just because Oklahoma jumped out to the big start, but Alabama blew them out of the water after that, and then Miami, Texas A&M, nobody could move the ball. This past week, Miami, Ohio State was interesting. Miami beating Ohio State, certainly I did not have on my bingo card. That was impressive. Ohio State did not look good really at all in that game. Our bozo friends at Texas Tech getting blanked by Oregon. It was a very tough look, and it would have been hard to have been Baron Morton in that sad, or I guess that was yesterday, right? That Thursday to jump on Twitter and see your name, because he bore the majority of the blame for that poor performance from Texas Tech, and that was not simply him, but he really did not look good, and you saw a lot of people laughing at Texas Tech because they spent so much money on their roster and neglected to up to improve their quarterback position, and they paid the price. All that money, I don't want to say out the window. You made the college football playoff. You got a huge chunk of change for doing so. We'll see how they split that money up. But Texas Tech just looked bad. Oregon really embarrassed them. In fact, James Madison, I thought, played a better game against Oregon, even though they allowed 51 points than Texas Tech did.
Well, and it's not just Texas Tech suffering. It's the entire Big 12 now that is getting laughed at, because that's the whole argument, right? The Big 10 and SEC don't want all these other Big 12 teams in the playoff because they don't feel like they're worth taking up spots. And I guess Arizona State last year almost beat Texas.
Almost,
so whatever.
Yeah.
But then you show up and you get blanked this year after having the bye.
By the team that was clearly the best team in the Big 12 this year.
And that is literally worst case scenario for the Big 12.
Yep. Yeah. For BYU to get stomped the way they did twice against Texas Tech, and to say that our argument is our only loss is to Texas Tech, and Texas Tech to go scoreless in the college football playoff, not a banner year for the Big 12, unfortunately. And regardless of how good of a conference you think it was, the ACC is still alive. Miami is still playing. Miami beat the reigning champion, Ohio State. You cannot argue now that Miami didn't belong in there. You can argue that Texas Tech didn't belong. They had one of the worst performances we've seen. In fact, they did have the worst performance that we've seen so far in the college football playoff. Worse than Texas A&M, only scoring 3 points. So not a great look for the Big 12, not a great look for Texas Tech. Very curious to see which direction they go with their quarterback this offseason. They're going to lose some names just because they had such a good team. Some of those guys are going to the NFL. We'll see if Texas Tech's able to rebuild coming up this offseason with that money. Maybe the worst game was Indiana-Alabama, just because that game was 17-0 at halftime. It wasn't close. At least in the Texas Tech game, it felt like, 13-0, I think, in the fourth quarter still at one point. It was a little bit like the Utah-Texas Tech game where you thought, you get a score here, and it's only a one-score game. And there were certainly some opportunities to threaten that, and they just never were able to punch it in. But Indiana blew Alabama off the field, and it is shocking to see both Alabama and Georgia. Georgia was competitive, certainly with Indiana last night, or with Ole Miss last night, excuse me. But to just not look like they belong on the field with Indiana is crazy. And Indiana, correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, they look like not just the front runners. They look like they were playing a different sport than everybody else that was playing the college football playoff weekend.
Yeah, they almost look like the Georgia team a couple years ago. They just ragdolled everybody, and it is impressive what Indiana's doing. I think definitely going into the semifinals, it seems like Indiana is by far the favorite, and I know they're the 1 seed, but especially if they can get past Oregon and make it to the championship, I'm not confident in Miami or Ole Miss against an Indiana team. So credit to them. Credit to Kurt Cignetti. He's done a great job.
It's crazy going back and looking at his resume, and not that he won at James Madison, but he was at IUPUI, if I remember correctly, right? Like, he didn't really get a start as a guy until he was 55 years old, 54 years old, and now he's in his early 60s, and he looks like the best coach in college football. And Indiana was a joke. Indiana's been a joke of a football team, and I don't mean that in a mean way, but it's a basketball state. It's certainly never thought of as a great football program. And, yeah, they look like they've got the national championship in their grasp right now. They've got potential number 1 overall pick at quarterback right now. He plays awesome. The defense is insane. It's a fun story. It is, I guess, actually what the college football playoff was trying to preach, though. With what they've done this season, it would have been impossible to keep them out of any previous system we've ever seen. Ole Miss, Georgia, fun last night. Good for Ole Miss. Drama with their coaches of whether or not those guys are actually going to be able to coach with the team next week, or if they're expected now to join LSU because people didn't expect them to pass Georgia. So some of those guys are going to have to make that move to recruiting at LSU. I don't think that will be the case. I think it's better for Ole Miss, obviously, to continue to compete now in the semis. But the teams remaining: Oregon, Ole Miss, Indiana, and Miami. Only one of the top 4 seeds advances, and last year none of the top 4 seeds advanced. Am I correct on that? So that bye week has not proven to be all that beneficial, or maybe we're just picking the wrong teams. Maybe we're not seeing the right teams. They do, and I sound like a broken record. I'm not the only person saying this. They've got to speed up this process. You cannot play your last game in early December and then not play again until New Year's Day. It's not possible. You've got to find a way to either extend the college football regular season, push it back a week so you play your final game on the 15th, and then the first game start 9 games later, or 9 days later, or 10 days later. You can't have 15, 18, 20 days off between games, especially for these top teams. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I mean, BYU had 20 days between the Big 12 championship and their bowl game. Texas Tech played, 5 days later, right? So that's almost a month in between games. And I think it was Dan Lanning was ranting about this. I totally agree. I also don't think there should be other bowl games on the day that, the college football playoff is played. On New Year's Eve, there were several bowl games as well as the college football playoff game at the night. I don't like that either. I don't know.
I don't mind it being the nightcap. I don't have as much a problem if you're going to play one there, and that's what they tried to do. And luckily, if you're a Utah fan, Utah played very well against Nebraska, other than another slow start. You thought, here this goes again. And we'll talk about Utah's bowl win with Steve Bartle coming up next a little bit more. But I am with you. It did. I'm not sure it set the table for the big game as well as maybe it could have. And then, you're playing a huge game on New Year's Eve night. Like, people are busy. People are going out. People are having poker nights. People are making pizza. Whatever they're doing, people are don't have all their attention glued to the college football playoff. So it's not been a great product so far. I don't know if we're going to get a great product. I don't know if these final 3 games are going to be elite either. I don't think anyone's going to compete with Indiana. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that. I hope I'm wrong on that. I hope we get some absolutely classic games. But Indiana looks far and away like the best team, and I think they're going to steamroll whoever's in front of them. All right, Steve Bartle will join us next. What's the latest with Utah's coaching hires? Which direction are they looking for their new offensive coordinator? He'll let us know. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.